Okay, we're very lucky today to have with us Dr. Eve Addis. Eve has been involved in the design, development, and operations of all kinds of behavioral health programs, community-based programs, housing programs for many, many years. And quite a while ago, Eve was left his job as COO of a very large organization in New York City to open his own practice, and has been really successful working with all kinds of different agencies in New York on all kinds of things, such as housing, uh, executive coaching, trauma-informed care, supervision, team building, and lots more. You'd be able to read his bio in your pages. But most importantly, Eve comes to us with a tremendous amount of knowledge and a great way of providing it for us. So it's my absolute pleasure to turn the stage over to Eve. And remember that you will be in those little boxes, so we can't see your hand raised. So Eve does not mind being stopped in the middle. Just yell Eve, and we'll, if you have a question or a comment, and also use the chat, and I'll interrupt and tell him there's something in the chat box. And with that, my friend, it's yours.
Hi, everyone. First of all, it's nice to see faces, and I'm glad that you all have your cameras turned on. So that with that introduction, I have a big responsibility now because Edie inevitably always inflates me with her praise. I am very happy to be here. I've done this for the last 3 or 4 years, and I'm glad to hear from Edie as she introduced all of you how active you are and how participatory you are, and I hope that you will not let me down today, and that you'll continue to participate and to chime in because this is sort of, I'd like this to be more of a thought dialogue. I'd really like this to be something that that you're not passively just absorbing things, but that you're really thinking about what we're going to be talking about. And it's something that is both kind of universal because there are aspects of it that exist everywhere, and then it's also very personal because supervision is very personal, because no two supervisors are alike. So, and also no two supervisors themselves as supervisees need the same things. So what I'd like you to do is kind of personalize it a little bit and share with the team, because that kind of blows the thing in a way, it expands it in a way that can really be helpful for all of us as we hear about our own experiences, about our own needs, about the ways our needs as employees have been met, and the way our needs as employees have not been met. Everybody has had loads of supervisors, the ones you loved, why? And the ones you weren't so crazy about, why? Where was the mismatch, or where was the connection? So I'm putting all of this as we go through this for you to kind of be thinking about that somewhere over here as you're kind of absorbing the content of the slides. And I'm not at all invested in going through all the slides necessarily. We will go as far as we can. I am much more interested in engaging you and getting your input and getting your ideas and getting your questions, and also the ways in which you might disagree. You're not required to agree with anything here, and challenges are very healthy because they really make us go deeper into what we're discussing.
Eve,
So,
can I stop you for 1 second?
no,
As I said, Eileen was unable to be here today, and my screen says that it's recording, but I don't see it anywhere.
I
Do you
got
have,
it.
you
I
do,
got it.
okay. I
I
just want
got
to
it.
make sure it's on your screen.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Well, it
great.
was. I pressed OK and it went away.
Okay, great.
All right, so I'm going to share, and this should be it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. So here you got everybody sees this? Okay.
Yeah.
So did somebody say no? Okay. So the art of supervision and team building, and what we're going to be doing today is talking about something called psychological safety and engagement. I'm gonna start with, just to kick us off and just to get us started with, a little bit of kind of the stuff we know about supervision, and then kind of get into how these elements, engagement and psychological safety, sort of play. How do they play in what supervision, what we typically understand as the purpose or the role or the themes of supervision? So, performance monitoring is a very important aspect of supervision. And performance monitoring usually to regulatory standards. And this is sort of stuff that you can add to this, certainly, but you provide guidance and support, you set expectations, you do problem solving, you train people in policy implementation, you sample documentation, timeliness and quality, you monitor productivity, time and attendance, you monitor adherence to job responsibilities, task management. And then, unfortunately, sometimes things go south and there's disciplinary activity that you have to engage in, not our favorite thing to do. And then termination, which is, sort of the end of the supervisory relationship. Uh, in terms of workforce development, you motivate, you model behavior, you share expertise, again, problem solving, you teach skills, you provide a path to performance effectiveness, you identify barriers to performance effectiveness, and hopefully you help your supervisees develop self-awareness and self-reflection. Is there anything else you want to add to this list, to either of these lists? Something that I didn't mention here in terms of the basic functions of supervision, or the basic uh, objectives of supervision? No? Okay.
I think you covered it well.
Okay. I know that I didn't, and I'm hoping to hear that. Hoping to hear those corrections as we proceed. Okay, so there's some research. Harvard Business Review. I don't know if any of you subscribe to the Harvard Business Review, but it's really a good thing to be able to check out. So I highly recommend it. There's a lot of information there on management, leadership, and all sorts of things. Of course, it doesn't particularly focus on behavioral health, but it does include healthcare in its research. So this research was new hires, psychological safety erodes quickly. And I was intrigued by that. And so I read the piece, and the summary is as follows. Across industries from manufacturing to healthcare, the luxury of waiting years to benefit from new talent is long gone. Thriving in today's dynamic economy means bringing new hires up the learning curve faster than ever. Yet, the author's latest research suggests one catalyst for learning is often lacking when it's needed most: psychological safety. So I'd like to stop here for a minute and kind of give you a chance to reread this and tell me how you perceive the summary of this research in terms of the context in which you work. And so it speaks about new hires. It speaks about, new hires who, ultimately should thrive well in organizations, and the organization is waiting for their talent to bloom. But before that could happen, the absence of psychological safety causes prevents the culmination of that flourishing talent. So what do you, let me hear how you react to this.
Could you explain what psychological safety means?
Oh, we're going to get to it. But what I want, when I read it, I sort of, when I read the summary, I was where you are. I was, okay, so what is this thing called psychological safety, right? So I want you to react to this the same way that I did. I was intrigued. So let's talk about psychological safety as something that we're not exactly sure, unless it's one of you who sort of knows what it is. Do any of
I,
you?
I
Huh?
don't know what it is, but I have a thought
Sure.
about like when I first read it. We're a community-based peer organization, peer-led, peer-run. And so it's very important for our team, our staff to feel safe in the environment because we have lived experience. We have people that come through our doors that we help that, comes from all different walks of life. And so we want our team to feel as if they're safe to do their job, they have the training to do their job, and they have the support to do their job and the tools to do their job. And if they don't, perhaps they don't feel safe enough to succeed in what their job is to do. That was just my initial thought about it. I could be,
Okay.
wrong, but that's what I thought.
Pretty good one.
That's very good. That's really great because that you pretty much covered it. There's some nuance that I'll go over, but that's it. However, within the context of this summary and this research, uh, how does the absence or why would the absence of psychological safety interfere with with a person's sort of flourishing and becoming what you, the supervisor, wanted from them when you hired them, but somehow absent psychological safety, according to this research, that never happens. So let's talk about for a second about the flip side of it. So so why is that an important part for people to flourish?
My thought when reading this was, and bringing new hires up the learning curve faster than ever might entail, there's a lot thrown at a new hire in terms of learning systems and what their job and responsibility are. And it could be a lot for a new hire. And if the new hires don't have psychological safety, and I took that to mean, new hires, given the increase in responsibility and wanting them to be caught up to the learning curve fast, that they may there's going to be mistakes made along this process. And so new hires having the space and feeling comfortable with mistakes being part of that learning process, I think would provide them with psychological safety and also the ability for new hires to say, feel comfortable saying this is too fast. Can we slow down? Or I'm not understanding this aspect of it. So we're not just bulldozing over their needs and concerns in order to catch them up. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. What do the rest of you think of that? Have any of you, because I think that you're absolutely on target here. What's the rest of you, what's your experience with new hires and what they need? And I'm not only sort of limiting this conversation to new hires, because psychological safety is important across the board for new hires and old timers. But so what do you think? What do you think of that? Of this notion of particularly new hires, but even beyond that, in terms of psychological safety and its importance?
I was going to say that I thought that along with psychological safety comes the permission to ask questions. I think that those of us who have been in our positions or with our organizations for a long time, like live it so much that we might be starting at step 5 in an explanation when the person obviously needs you to start at step 1. So if the person's feeling like there's the safety within their role and within your relationship to ask that question or to kind of ratchet it down to a few steps prior to where you were at. Otherwise, the train kind of has left the station.
Mhm. And that can result in a sort of these expectations that you might have all of a sudden. I mean, it's the shutdown. I think what
Mhm.
what this is about is that the shutdown happens very quickly. And so, you know, your aspirations or your expectations around people that you bring on who have a lot of promise, you know, absent this thing we're calling psychological safety, you know, results in a shutdown, for lack of a better word. Okay, thank you. You know, stay on these thoughts. I mean, don't keep thinking along these lines, because this will evolve, and I'm hoping to kind of have us, you know, go and take a deeper dive into this. So today's agenda is going to be, we're going to define and talk about what's employee engagement. We're going to hopefully get into a deeper dive of what psychological safety is and how we define it, why it's important, and I think we touched on that so far. And then most importantly, I guess throughout, and also for you to think about, how do you operationalize it? So it's a good thing to talk about something conceptually and theoretically, but how do we intentionally create psychological safety? How do we ensure that it exists? Your leaders, your supervisors, you know, is it something that is exclusive to your supervisory sessions with your supervisees? Or is it something that should sort of, you know, be throughout every encounter and every organizational meeting, and so it becomes part of the culture, that there is a culture of, and how do we get that? How do we get there? And think about your own organizations, think about your own jobs, think about your own psychological safety. How does it work for you? Does it exist for you? Does it exist for you in this culture, this wholeness, this, you know, in its entirety, your entire work experience? Is it fragmented? Is it isolated? So let's sort of, again, put these things, you know, let them sort of rumble in our heads as we go forward. So I'm going to start with employee engagement, because engagement and psychological safety, you can't feel psychologically safe if you're not engaged, and psychological safety promotes engagement. So these two things kind of are hand in hand. So the definition of employee engagement is the ways in which an organization operates in meeting the fundamental psychological requirements for unleashing workforce potential. Okay, so this is something that, again, are you engaged? Again, personally here, are you engaged? Are you engaged in your work and in your organizations? How do you know that you're engaged? So if you answer yes, how do you know that, to say that? And then in terms of your supervisory roles, how engaged is your staff? And how do you know? How could you tell? So according to a Gallup poll in 2023, globally, again, including healthcare, this is not necessarily only about healthcare, only 23% of employees, are engaged in their work. Okay, that is pretty horrible. Would you agree with that? And if you think about attaching a percentage, and again, you know, and you're thinking about your own organizations, what would your percentage be if we were to make it specific to you, to the place where you work? How many? So I know I could see your head spinning now, and you're going down your Rolodex of employees and thinking engaged, not engaged, not engaged, engaged, engaged. All right. So what do you think it would be? So you don't have to share with me or with anybody else, but keep in mind that, you know, you've got some sense. And those of you who are sort of upwards of 75%, that's great. I mean, if you really have sort of done a really analysis here and you come, but if you're below 50%, that's not so good.
I
yeah.
just had a huge fail. I'm so glad we're talking about this, because I just had a huge fail. Our organization is built on the passions that our staff have. And all of our staff start out as volunteers because we want to make sure they understand our culture, what we do. And, so we usually hire, our staff and interns and stuff like that. And I just had a huge fail where I hired someone who I don't think she felt psychologically safe because she withheld information from the team and leadership that affected the team, which resulted in her not working with us anymore because she felt as if she wasn't being heard or understood. And I thought as a leader that I was providing those opportunities. But it was like when I got her letter of resignation, like my heart just dropped because like I felt like I failed her. And that wasn't the intention. It's for any of my team, because everybody on my team has a voice and we try to communicate that. We all play a role in the success of the organization at our different, positions. But I just had this huge fail. So I just wanted to share that because I feel like that's what we're talking about right now.
It absolutely is. And you said a lot of very important things there. And I want to tell you that that's where the nuance comes in, because you have a culture that sort of really pays attention to the needs of the folks, and that you really, it's part of who you all are. And yet with this one person, something didn't connect. And that's where the personal aspect of this whole idea of psychological safety comes in and engagement comes in. So there are some universal aspects of it that, that everybody does, or in other words, I could give you sort of a recipe and say, oh, you need to do boom, 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 boom. And I'm gonna boom, 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 and you've got psychological safety. So that's sort of like the backdrop, and maybe, Gwen, you've got the backdrop, but something with that individual specifically didn't get through. And that will happen. But maybe if you're more intentionally in tune, or you go, or you can pick up some cues that it's not clicking, and then sort of think, okay, the backdrop, the sort of the feel of the place, it's getting to everybody else, but this person maybe needs something more or something else. And it's very disappointing, as you say. It's heartbreaking sometimes when you've got somebody and there's so much promise there, and then it's failed. So the only thing I could tell you is, learn from the experience, and maybe there'll be some epiphany that you'll have and say, okay, maybe this is where it didn't work for this person. Sometimes I have to say, it's a bad match. Okay. So sometimes there's just that kind of like you couldn't have done anything else. So I don't want people to walk away and think that everybody that resigns, that it's a result of their failure. Sometimes, and actually I have learned in those uncomfortable moments when somebody needs to be terminated, is I say, this is not about you. Could be just that this was not a good match. That you need some things that we can't offer you here. And that it's not good for you to try to stay someplace where your needs aren't going to be met. So, so there's that aspect too. I just want to say that because otherwise I'm going to have, 12 people on this screen who are going to come off of this thing feeling guilty. I don't want anybody to feel guilty. Okay. All right. So, so this is the statistic. So again, if you're better than 23%, you're doing better than the rest of the world. But just as tongue in cheek, we can say that. All right. So leaders and managers who understand and are committed to employee engagement promote, this is the important part, increased productivity, employee well-being and loyalty, and high quality outcomes. So this is sort of the next sort of the takeaway of why engagement and psychological safety are important, because they yield the kinds of outcomes, and they yield the levels of productivity and employee well-being and the loyalty we all want, right? This is what it's all about. This is why we move into leadership and supervisory positions, is to support people and guide them and help them to achieve all of these things. Okay. So now we get to the question, intentionally, how do you engage your supervisees? Can't be that hard.
No, you guys gonna make me talk all day, and this team knows that I will.
All right, well, let's see if somebody comes to your rescue, Gwen. Let's give them a chance. Let's see if somebody comes to your I know you're chomping at the bit. Let's see what. Come on. You do this, right?
So
I'm
I
assuming
engage,
that you do this, yeah?
I engage on a couple different levels, depending on where we're at in the week and kind of what's transpired. We'll either do a check-in, something really simple, like what have been the highlights of your week? What have been the challenges? What are the opportunities for support? Sometimes I'll just do a more human to human check-in just to take temperature on like, hey, what's going well in your life outside of work? Just to really connect on that human to human, because we get so stuck. We're always so busy and we deal with some heavy stuff because, you know, obviously we're supporting folks that sleep outside. So they're, you know, got an untold level of trauma and crises and things like that. So sometimes we just jump in and tick things off like the to-do list. And I'm like, let's just pause for a moment. Sometimes I'll incorporate breathing activities, like box breathing, if there is like a really intense thing going on. That's how I kick it off.
Hey, so you really go from the the psychological to the physical. I mean, you really help people to kind of decompress, breathing, all of that. You're very conscious, obviously. And this is sort of, what I got between the lines is how difficult the work is,
Whew.
how depleting it can be.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think you just hit on step one, acknowledging how hard the work is.
Mm-hmm.
Acknowledging how deeply affecting it is, especially if you expect your staff to be authentic in their work. Then something.
Yeah, which we do. So we definitely have a balance of about 85% of my staff. So that's managers, and then their staffs are people with lived expertise in this work. You don't want to drain the passion, because obviously folks with lived expertise have that kind of passion and that drive because they're fulfilling a purpose. And that can be drained pretty quickly if you're not focusing on how to balance that, right?
So yes, and so just to kind of summarize, it's intentionally acknowledging the demands of the job, and then giving people some tools to manage that.
Mm-hmm.
And being, of course, it sounds to me like you're there, you're accessible. What else? So accessibility is part of engagement, giving people tools is part of engagement, and acknowledging the strain of the work. How else do you engage your supervisees?
Pat, did you unmute before and want to say something, or did I just?
I did, and Kwika said many of the things that I was going to say, so they were summarized beautifully. And so I engage with them not just during our scheduled supervision times, but in between supervisions, if I know somebody on my team is meeting with a family or dealing with a specific issue, I might check in with them later that day or the following day to see how that went. Might be something we discussed in supervision on how to approach, and then I might follow up with them and get their temperature on how it went. And I also will help provide resources to team members and supervisees outside of supervision. If upon reviewing some of their documentation, I see a family struggling with something or could use a thing, I will send that resource to a provider and say, oh, I was reading through your notes or your treatment plan, and have you thought about something like this? And so I'll do that as a way to engage.
That's so you do Supervision Plus. It's really like you really tap into expressions or different ways in which your staff do their job, different aspects of their roles, and then you're interested. You're interested not only in what they tell you in supervision, but you're interested in how it goes for them, and you're willing to give of your time and kind of to let them know you're there, you know. And that's a very important part of engagement. When you think about your own relationships, you know, it's not only about when you're with the person in that moment, but it's about the person knows that you're going through something and they'll call you up and say, how's it going? Or you mentioned something in the conversation that, you know, you didn't think was that important, but the other person calls you up 3 days later and say, hey, you know, you mentioned you had a doctor's appointment, you know, is everything okay? That's engagement. That's something that, you know, keeps the connection. So you're doing that. And you know, and you get that. And maybe you get it because it's something that's important to you, that you need that from others to be connected. And so your lived experience, your lived relational experience has sort of transformed or moved into your work experience. And now you are providing, and this is where the personal part of it is, you're providing for the people that you supervise what you need.
That's
Now,
correct.
that could be a double-edged sword, right? Because if you're a very needy person, you're taking that into your supervision might result in you're becoming a micromanager, which you don't want to do. So it's sort of like you have to do a lot of self-reflection because and you have to sort of, what's the word, boundaries. You have to know when, you know, when it's good to extend what you need to others, and when no, I better not do that because they're going to run the other way. So yeah, so that's great. Anybody else? How do you engage your supervisees?
So one of the things I do, there's not enough hours in the day to get the work done that needs to be done. And sometimes
a good recognition that you recognize that. That's another one. I just had to interrupt and tell you the work is hard and it has no end. Okay.
right.
Go ahead.
And so we have clinic meetings for part of that, we're talking about our high-risk individuals. But one of the things that I've tried to do during those clinic meetings is be as transparent as possible. If I'm asking them to do something, for example, a performance intervention plan from OMH, if I'm asking them to understand why, no, I try my best to have them understand why I'm asking for certain documentation. And in a way, it helps with buy-in if they know, if you're not just saying, look, you got to get this done, as opposed to, you know what, this is part of how we make this clinic better. And we're all a part of that.
So I like the transparency, you know, and you know, I'm going to take this just a little bit further in terms of asking, why is transparency important for people to feel engaged? I mean, that's such a good point. But why is that important? I mean, you can answer, and then we could see if anybody else wants. Go ahead. Why is that important?
Well, I think the reality of it is too, is that if we're not, left to our own devices, we're going to come up with other things in our head, and it leads, I'm not saying it correctly. It can lead to bad feelings. If people think that we're not being honest with them, they're going to make up their own decisions. And, you know, sometimes a little bit I've heard in other places, that's the way it's always done. That doesn't mean it always has to be that way, but it's just a way of taking that negative and keeping it there. So if you're transparent, it does help with the buy-in, that I am a part of this, as opposed to maybe I'm not.
You know, I froze for the last couple of words. So could you just repeat that? For some reason, my internet connection is the last couple of things you said, the last 3 words. All right.
As opposed to maybe I'm not part of something, but maybe I'm not.
Okay. Yeah, you know, one of the things, I had a supervisor once, and something came up, and I was assigned a task, and it kind of didn't make sense to me. I mean, it wasn't something I couldn't do, but it kind of came out of the blue. And so I said, why are we doing this? And my supervisor says, you don't need to know that. That's very blunt, right? You don't need to know that. And, you know, reason I remember that, and this happened maybe 30 years ago, is because it always stayed with me how dismissive that was. And how it was just not something that made me feel part of the organization. And what I'm getting at here is that transparency serves a purpose, in that it lets the employee know that you respect them enough that you feel that they need to know this about how the organization works. And that induces a sense of belonging, you know, because you're sharing this with me. And even though, it may not be, that critical, but the fact that you're sharing with me means a lot, that you're trusting me with this information, or you feel that I'm important enough that I need to know that. So that's a very, I think you touched on an important thing about connectivity, about connecting to an organization, is also to know the whys and wherefores of the organization's mission, vision, and everyday operation. It makes me feel part of it if you share that with me. Okay.
You know, before you move off, I want to throw one other thing in. There's a training I do for lower level managers who face this a little more often than you do, but there is this we-they concept of direct practitioners against administrators. And without this transparency that you're talking about, Jody, it becomes very much a we-they. They don't understand, they don't know what we do, and that is extremely divisive, and I'm sure that it completely kills engagement. But it's divisive for so many other reasons. So breaking down that we-they is a really important step in making sure that people are engaged.
Yeah, the we-they piece is a complete disengagement. Okay, it's when there are two, and that of course is dramatically unproductive for an organization. It's dramatically destructive to an organization, and
it's rampant. So it's not like it's in a couple of places. You really have to struggle, I think, against it.
Yeah, and you struggle and be intentional in knowing where it exists and diving in and fixing it and living it.
Yes.
Also living it. Because it's very easy to do that. Everybody wants to blame somebody for their unhappiness. So, okay. So a lot of what you've said translates into this idea of feeling seen and heard. and you know, whether it's you know, a person who craves to belong, and you give them that sense of belonging, you know, a person who just kind of needs to have you acknowledge, needs to have you recognize who they are, and what their ideas are, and that they're, you know, their what they say resonates with you. So, and here again, think about yourselves. Think about your own needs to feel seen and heard. Is there anybody here who can honestly say they don't need that they don't need to feel seen and heard in their world, and especially in their workplace? And the second part of that is, and this is tough, do you feel seen and heard? And then, of course, what happens when you don't feel seen and heard? So play with that for a few minutes. And if you can, it would be great for all of us to hear an instance, an example of a time where you actually felt genuinely seen and heard. And how it felt.
So I have a very like stupid example, but it
No,
was so aggravating.
Don't qualify it. Let us decide if it's
All
stupid.
right, so you can let me know if it's stupid.
Okay.
So we our executive director put forth a policy that there was going to be no work from home on inclement weather days, and that people either needed to make it into the office or take their time. And during COVID and everything, we had people working remotely, and I felt very strongly that that was not a good policy for us to have. So one day this past winter, we had a snowstorm, and the policy was in effect, and like 90% of our staff pulled out, and we didn't provide many services that day. So I met with him and reviewed, and I wasn't driving into the office in teeming snowstorm, and took off, and my direct reports did too, but we all still had to field calls and deal with our staff and everything. So while we could be productive at home, I just kind of was not going to you know, work from home and not put in the time, because my staff and their staff couldn't do that. So I wanted to follow the policy the same as the expectation of everybody else was. So then I met with him. I outlined why that policy didn't make any sense, how, you know, I showed him data about why we missed serving individuals, and how we could have done differently by allowing staff to work from home, and what positions would have been appropriate to work from home. And we were able to come to an agreement about changing that policy going forward, so that people had the opportunity under certain, you know, circumstances, depending on the site and the weather conditions, et cetera. So it was like a silly thing that just felt very unjust to me, and we weren't serving the community, which is what it came down to. So I felt very empowered after that conversation. Again, it's like a silly thing that's only going to come up a couple times a year, but it just wasn't fair. And I didn't feel like I could explain the policy to anyone who asked me about it, other than to say that's the policy. So it was just one example that pops immediately to mind.
Yeah, and you know, when you went into that discussion, did you have any inkling that it might have turned out that way, that you were seen and heard, or were you worried that you might not be?
I thought it could go either way. I think that going with the data was really important, because I think that, you know, our executive director tends to be very open-minded, but just wasn't seeing the reality of this particular situation, and was thinking, well, people are just going to drive in, and just because he's comfortable driving in inclement weather, 90% of our staff were not, and this was the end result. So I think that, you know, being able to display the outcome was helpful in that scenario, and allowed us to kind of have a meeting of the minds. I was able to get feedback from my team as to the proposed policy, to make any tweaks, you know, we needed going forward.
So this is a good example of, putting together, because it sounds to me like you put together a package of data and ideas and ways, and you present it. And so it's a very deliberate effort to be seen and heard. Like, I'm piling on here all the elements that I can think of that's going to make you see what I'm trying to get at and why it's important. And sounds like you did a great job. And it felt really good, right? It felt really
Yeah.
good that you were able to kind of move this thing in the direction that you felt was better for the organization. Not all, but not all instances and relationships are that deliberate. Sometimes it's much more a person feeling like the other person, did you ever have that like like, for example, you have a conversation with somebody, and it's not somebody you know very well, but it's somebody you have a conversation with. Let's say you go somewhere and you're done. And at the end of the conversation, what you think in your head is, they get me. This person gets me. And you don't maybe analyze it any further than that, but you just get this feeling that this other person saw you and heard you. They got you. And so think about that too, where it's not that deliberate, where it's not that planned, but think about a situation where that happened to you. And you could either, describe it or just tell me the sense of maybe thinking about, well, why was that important to you? And why is it important to be gotten? Why do we strive for that? Why do we need that? I don't know. I asked a lot of questions. I'm confused now what I really want you to say, but just say something, respond to this idea and what it personally means to you, or when it's happened to you, or I just want to kind of stir this pot a little bit, around the importance of feeling seen and heard. Because it has to do with what psychological safety and engagement are. Right.
I would say the thing that's coming to the top of my mind is it honors the other person for existing in life as they are, where they're at this organization. So it provides that, I guess, feelings of connectedness. I don't know if I'm getting too hooey granola on you guys. But like,
we'll allow it since you're from Colorado.
Like I see you for who you are at this moment in time, with all you are or come with or value. It's just like honoring the person for who they are. That's what's just coming up for me.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to describe it. And again, you don't have to tell me this, but to think about for yourselves, does that exist for you where you work? And how important that is to you, because obviously the meaning of that. And then how do you intentionally, how do you have a consciousness about that and a self-awareness about that as to whether you're doing that for others? How do you play that to make other people feel seen and heard? So I'm going to go into a little bit of sort of like to kind of tease this out a little bit, because
just before you go, Gwen, we did not mean to shut you up in any way. You wrote a lovely thing in the chat. So just go ahead for a minute. What's interesting about what Gwen wrote, to peek everybody, is that some program models, and like a peer organization that's a clubhouse model, has a culture of inclusiveness, and you have to really bend over backwards to knock that out. So sometimes it's helpful to be in a place where that's the very culture of the service provision. But I've seen clubhouses that have managed to remove that feeling. So I think it's always a struggle, no matter what. Go ahead, Gwen, if you would say something else. It was very nicely stated.
I just the nothing about us without us is is really important, because that's the way our organization actually was founded too. We don't have like a program calendar that people can come in and choose from. Our programs are created by our staff based off of their lived experience, off of their training, off of what they, want to contribute and how they see their healing has taken place. So it gets them more engaged, and it helps them to teach people how to reimagine what healing is like. It doesn't have to be behind closed doors in a sterile place where you don't feel warm and safe and stuff like that. We try, environment is really important, and like learning each other's love languages also is a way to feel a sense of belonging, because people, like, if you're having a bad day, we're in such a hard job, like our jobs are so hard. And so when we know that, for example, if somebody's love language was affirmations and they're having a bad day, we know how to lift them up, to affirm them, whether they're a staff member or a member. Like, we know things about them to help bring up their confidence, so that they can get back in and not fall into a spiral, spiral situation. So just those are just a couple little things.
You
Thank
know,
you.
they're very important things, Gwen, and also keeping in mind that that your leadership is also part of sort of the downstreaming of this, so that you obviously do something directly. Not every CEO has that opportunity, depending on the layers of the organization. So, you have a very, and I could tell you really feel it. I mean, you're immersed in it, and so it's again, like you said, environment is everything, right? So so the thing is that it may not be as available or as accessible in other places, that there are more layers, or perhaps they're a larger organization, or there are many more different kinds of jobs that people have. And as Edie said, sometimes because everybody in your organization has lived experience, right? Sometimes that could get in the way of really understanding the individual experience, because you think, oh, we both have lived experience, so I know exactly what you're going through, but hell no, I don't know exactly what you're going through. So it's very important to always also not get, too confident that because you had a similar experience, that the other person experienced it exactly the same way. It's a very nuanced thing, but I think the takeaway here is it's being kind of aware that this is that and conscious and deliberate in how, especially with people who, sometimes are kind of beginning to feel, and you begin to see disengagement. You begin to see that this is, so keeping this in mind, that this may be part of it, is this person is not feeling seen and heard, because that immediately leads to withdrawal and that's not, and disconnection. So you don't want that to happen. But thank you, Gwen. And don't ever think that you talk too much or say too much. Whenever you feel like you need to say something, you go right ahead and say it,
Absolutely.
Okay.
Eve, we're 50 minutes in.
Okay. Yeah, well, you know what happens, Edie.
I know. That's why I'm reminding you.
Okay. So just to kind of tease this a little bit more. So being seen and heard is being acknowledged and understood by someone else in a significant and powerful way. So the difference between feeling seen and feeling heard is that feeling seen is about people respect and see my identity and my way of being in the world. Feeling heard is about people respect and listen to my perspectives and lived experience. Feeling seen is someone else recognizing, absent of any input, some characteristic or nuance that one considers part of their identity. So again, there's a difference between bringing something to someone and just being and feeling that I am seen. I didn't have to give anything to anyone. I didn't have to put anything in, but I feel that this person knows who I am. Feeling heard involves two people in an exchange of ideas. One person to convey a message and this is the important part, and the other to receive it and acknowledge it as meaningful for themselves. So this is not only do I hear you, but it resonates with me. And that's sometimes nonverbal, but it is what it means to be heard. To hear words is to receive and try them on for ourselves. To see another is to witness them and recognize their autonomy. Being seen is acknowledgement and validation of one's identity. Lived experience is that medium, whereas being heard is communicating that one is understood, and language, it's that medium. In the end, it's that experience of they get me. Any questions about that?
You know, I'd like to add one quick thing in this as well, after I now told you you had 50 minutes down.
Yeah.
If you live or work in a place so very different than who you are, like I live in an extremely conservative area. My agency was in this extremely conservative, sort of semi-rural area. It wasn't really rural, it's more ex-urban. But the feeling part never, I mean, it wasn't just that I didn't feel seen. No one got me, zero. There was no, I shouldn't say zero, 10%. There was no understanding on most of the other, not my staff, just politically, on what we believed in and what we stood for. And as a result of that, feeling heard became way more important, so that we had to be very careful about how we spoke about what we were doing and what we needed, because people didn't innately understand. And I think that I really love these two slides, Eve, in that there's a real difference between feeling seen and feeling heard, and what you have to do. If you are seen, you actually have to be in some ways, less careful about what you say, because people get you. If nobody gets you, you have to be really intentional about what you say.
Right. And the other piece of this, you know, to kind of piggyback on what Edie's saying, for the people in the behavioral health field, particularly people who are in direct care positions, it's to understand that if they're feeling seen and heard, they are much more likely to see and hear the people they serve. And healing, I'm sure you all know this, is about people feeling seen and heard. That's part of the healing process. Because part of the experience of being a recipient of services in behavioral health, in mental health, and substance abuse is that there's a lot of stigma and rejection and isolation and all of those things that prevent healing. And so feeling seen and heard promotes healing. But it can't happen in the relationship between the practitioner and the client if it's not happening between the organization and the practitioner. It has to have, the person providing the services has to feel seen and heard in order to consistently, because it's demoralizing not to feel seen and heard, and therefore it becomes more difficult to be available to others, and be available in that way where you can, as a practitioner, you can actually deliberately practice this idea of hearing, of seeing and hearing. So I have a little bit of a case study here that I'm going to read to you. I'm going to, because of the time, I'm not going to spend that much time on it, because this could be like an hour in and of itself, but we'll spend a few minutes. So and this is sort of to kind of see how this works, or what you might do in an actual situation. So I'll read this quickly. You can read along with me. You've just hired Kevin. He aced his interview by demonstrating how he has applied his training and experience to his work. You were impressed with his questions and his leadership potential. Your only concern was about his age. Kevin would be 8 years older than his oldest colleague and 10 to 12 years older than the others. So he's a little older person and is fitting in with younger staff cohort. In his first weeks of work, Kevin demonstrated he's a quick learner and reliable member of the team. While he's an active member and productive participant in meetings, You wonder whether his valuable contribution might be intimidating to the other members of the team. Yet, he seems well liked by others and always ready to pitch in and assist in situations raised by his colleagues. In supervision, Kevin is eager to learn and flexible in his willingness to explore different approaches to managing difficult situations. At a 6-month performance review, you ask Kevin to submit a self-review along specific performance categories. He scores himself realistically, but his accompanying narratives are terse and absent any self-examination. When you bring this up, he tells you that he knows how to do the job and didn't think there was anything more to say about it. When you hand him your evaluation, which is highly positive and praiseworthy, and ask if he has any questions about it, Kevin thanks you and tells you that he agrees with your assessment and has no questions. You are struck by Kevin's tepid response to your positive review of him, and in the days that follow, you notice a change in Kevin's energy and enthusiasm. Something has changed. So you can chime in here, answer any of these questions. We'll give this a few minutes, but I want you to think about this, and maybe some of you have had this experience. This is an actual thing that happened to me, so I'm putting it out there, you know, pretty much as I experienced it. So what do you think is going on? What could have happened over the last 6 months of Kevin's employment to have caused his attitude change? How might you have contributed to it, and how would you address it?
I think it's important to realize that praise does not necessarily equal engagement and support. I had that with an employee in a previous job, and we truly did him a disservice because he was doing a great job, and we kept saying, "This is great. You're doing everything you need to." It was a little bit hampered because he was on the ground in a different country, so I wasn't there in person. But he was struggling, but no one saw it because he was doing such a great job. And I think if we could have said, "Hey, how can we better support you? By that, you're doing a great job. What else do you need?" It would have made a huge difference. And he burned out, and it was really an unfortunate situation. But a lot of it was on us because we didn't see it happening.
Wow. Well, if that wasn't the perfect answer to this question, yeah, I mean, that's really something. That's right. Praise is not necessarily engagement. Anybody else? What do you think is going on? What do you think happened here? I mean, given the circumstances, the age issue, you know, the super enthusiasm, all of that, how did it turn sour? What do you think happened?
Well, it seems to be that there wasn't an established line of communication between the supervisor and the supervisory that was open, right? Like, you know, when conversations tend to go one way repeatedly, I swear, words, repeatedly, that they need to be, we need to think of curious ways to ask the same question, right? Different ways. Cause like, you know, what I encourage some of my managers, like when they get the one word short answers, kind of, yeah, everything's great. Like it's about asking more curious questions and several questions. So maybe there wasn't a dialogue established.
Absolutely. And you know what comes to mind when you say these words is you know, using the tenets of motivational interviewing in our supervisory role, that it's exactly, you know, the curiosity, the kind of the healthy curiosity, the engaging part of it is that I'm really interested. And it's not just that you're doing a good job, but yeah, but nothing is perfect, right? So, you know, opening the door to hear that, you know, we can get so like wrapped up in the idea as supervisors that we have a supervisor who is just perfect. You know, the relationship seems perfect. They do their job. Everything is on time. And we're so glad we hired them because they're meeting all our expectations. And you know that thing about the squeaky wheel, we pay attention to the squeaky wheel. And we forget that, you know, everybody has needs. and you know, maybe Kevin didn't feel seen and heard. He got a lot of praise for doing what he did, and he says it, right? I know what I'm doing. What else do you want? But there may have been a lot of other things going on. Anyway, so so how would you address it? So this is happening. So how would you kind of, you realize this, you have this epiphany, you go, you know, I really missed. So how would you fix it, for lack of a better word? What would you do?
Maybe he's got some ideas. Ask him if he has some ideas. Give him a path to advancing. It seems as though he's bored, perhaps, you know, you just get into that mundane type of thing. And like you said, I'm just doing my job, you know. So just giving him an opportunity to contribute and get his feedback.
Excellent.
To help
Yes.
him engage.
Yes. Yes. Help. Give him a sense that that there are things he can offer that are important, that his offerings are important. It's just about doing your job, but that you're valued. There's a value. Anything else that you might address it? So you come to this, you know, you figure it out, and then you're going to see Kevin in supervision tomorrow. What might you say to him?
I would do a reset, like start over at square one. Maybe it's taking them out to lunch, reestablishing kind of like the get to know you phase. How do you like to be best supervised? You know, offer moments of reflection for yourself as a supervisor. So asking for feedback. What do you think I could be doing better in this position? So like just reset, right? Like let's, you know, and not in a blame type of way, but like this is what I'm seeing. And I'm curious if what I'm feeling is aligned with what's happening, or if there's another reason that you might feel like sharing with me. But basically, just like hit that reset button. Something's not working. I don't know what it is. How do we do it together?
Resets are great, aren't they? You
Yeah.
know, when you give yourself the permission to do that, and that you're humble enough, right? Is that to know that you need a reset, right? So humility is a very important part of connection. It's a very important part of engagement, because, and it's also, you know, a part of psychological safety, in that a person will feel like, hey, you know, this person really respects me enough to be able to admit their vulnerability, to admit their lack of whatever. So yeah. Okay, you guys, you know, Edie, you were right. This is a great, this is
It
really
is,
a
isn't it?
great group. Yeah. Okay. So the keys to engagement are self-awareness, humility, transparency, collaboration, genuine curiosity, and accountability. And you all named these. So a round of applause. I mean, you know, you get it. And to sort of to do all of it, you know, to keep all of it in mind as you continue to sort of, you know, be in this role of leader and supervisor. So psychological safety is related. I mean, these things, they are different, but they're very intertwined. So, you know, take it as a whole. So when you see, we already sort of talked about what it brings to mind. And sort of, what do you need to feel psychologically safe at work? And what do you do to help others feel psychologically safe? So we kind of covered some of this, so I'm not going to belabor it. In terms of what you need to feel psychologically safe, you know, how do you communicate that? If you do communicate it, you know, it's interesting because I've been doing coaching of CEOs, and they don't really have a supervisor. I mean, the board is their, you know, the board of directors is their supervisor. But it's been very interesting because psychological safety between a CEO and their board is a very important thing. And nobody does this training for boards. You know, nobody does this training to help boards provide a psychologically safe relationship with their CEO. So that's another avenue, Edie, that I can start branching.
It's a new, A new line of business.
Right, because
And I have to tell you, this is having been being a recovering CEO.
yeah,
It's very rare to have psychological safety with your board, because one of the things about being a CEO is that your supervisor, the board, knows very little about you or what you do, and they can fire you at a given moment. And I have seen many, many really good CEOs lose their jobs.
right.
And so, yeah, it's a whole nother level of uncertainty and uncomfortability.
I have had one experience, I have to say, and I having never been a CEO, but with a CEO, with one of my CEOs, who was able to cultivate psychological safety with their board. And really the board and she and the board had an incredible relationship, and the organization was the beneficiary of that, in that it thrived and grew, and it was a wonderful collaboration, but it's rare. So if any of you who are CEOs or want to be CEOs, God knows why, this is something to remember, that you're not going to be as efficient, as effective, and as productive if you don't feel psychologically safe with your board. And so this is an important thing to consider. And if you're ever going to take a job as a CEO, be very wary of that. Because if that can't happen, or if there isn't a sense that that's possible, you're not going to be happy.
Right.
All right. Okay. So if you were to answer this questionnaire in order to feel psychologically safe, and this is something that you could use also with your supervisees, is I expect my supervisor to what? I expect my supervisor, and you mentioned some of this, to be transparent, to be, you know, to have healthy curiosity. I hope my supervisor will, this is aspirational. I will be disappointed if my supervisor doesn't blank. It would be impossible for me to feel safe with a supervisor who doesn't, and the best supervisor I ever had taught me or was. So, you know, you can, oh,
Where are you going?
okay. So
I
you
think it'd be great for you to do this with your staff. And I will pull this off of the slide and put it on a Word document, because I think the slides come to you and they can't be posted in PowerPoint. They have to be posted as a PDF. So so I'll pull this off and put it in resources. Okay.
now think of this also as, you know, a person might feel a little, depending on where you are in your relationship with your supervisee, a person may feel a little squeamish about answering this, or, you know, you don't want to traumatize anyone. So you could, but what you could do is you could give this out to people and let them answer it, you know, without identifying themselves, and then report back as to what people said. And that will demonstrate to folks that you're listening to them, that now you have sort of straight from them, you have a context within which to shape your own supervisory, your own supervisory style. And that can go a long way, making people like, hey, this supervisor really cares about. So it's getting this sort of data, if you will, but then also giving it back and saying, so this is what I learned from you guys. And this is going to help me sort of be a better supervisor. Okay. So psychological safety, this is sort of breaking it down, is where team members feel safe to take risks and be vulnerable around each other. And I think that this is sort of the way this sort of transforms into teams, in that it's not, this isn't an individual thing, but you want the whole team to feel this sense of safety. And because a lot of learning that happens in organizations happens between peers. It's not all coming, it's not directed all from, you know, the people with the highest titles to the people with the lower titles, but it could be people who learn from each other. And sort of somebody mentioned earlier about the ability to make mistakes. and the ability to learn, and a culture that is a learning culture where people can make mistakes. But so psychological safety depends on dependability, in that everybody is sort of healthy and recognizes that their timeliness, their regularity, the way they do their job impacts everybody else, and everybody takes dependability very seriously. That there's structure and clarity. Somebody said people know what is expected of them and have the tools to perform their jobs. Meaning, well, that's a more nuanced thing that I don't know that many supervisors explore. So why do you want to do this work? Why is this work important to you? In Gwen's shop, well, that's sort of giving back, right? I've been through this and now I want to give back, but that's not always the case. So Gwen, you can't even take that for granted, right? Because that might not be everyone's story. Learning, of course, that's what I spoke about, making mistakes. And this one is so important and very often left out of, the supervisory, handbook. It's that letting people know that their input is important because it creates change, that it matters, that what you do matters. It makes a difference. And there are many ways to do that. There are many ways to make people feel that, it could be individually or it could be as a team in terms of, productivity outcomes. It could be in terms of single stories. It's important to have a venue for people to tell their stories. I don't know how many of you have newsletters or how many of you have venues where your staff could tell the story of change or could tell the story of something that to acknowledge that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be them to do it for themselves, but it could be the administration who picks out something, that extraordinary thing that a person did that mattered. This is a very important part of the culture that is psychologically safe, in that it demonstrates that this is a value, an organizational value. So integrity, sincerity, reliability, trust, commitment, consistency, competence. And I want to get now, I'm going to skip through some of this stuff because it's pretty self-evident, but pillars of trust and safety. So this is sort of something that gets to kind of the dark side of this. What prevents you? Or what are the challenges? And you mentioned these already, and maybe I won't spend time because I want to get to the part of this presentation, which is about operationalizing psychological safety. So I'm just gonna, normally I would have stopped here, hoping you're thinking about these things. But I'm going to answer it for you because we have about a half hour left. This always happens. Okay, so barriers to managing and retaining a talented and effective workforce. You will recognize these, right? Salaries are not competitive. Everybody agree with that? Talent is hard to find at the current salaries. By the way, I don't know if everybody across the state is experiencing this, but in New York City, there's a tremendous number of vacancies in direct care jobs. Organizations are struggling to find staff. There is a real workforce shortage after COVID.
That's statewide, and I think it's nationwide.
Okay, so all of these things sort of are exponential now because this is. But I want to focus on the inherent risks of the job, what I call the occupational hazards, and this is something that Gwen mentioned earlier, and maybe somebody else, around what the continuous exposure to the pain and suffering of others. When you're in a direct care job, when you're working with people who somebody mentioned who are on the streets, do we acknowledge that? Do we acknowledge the potential triggering of the worker's own pain and suffering? So, with people with lived experience, that is sort of, very, very evident. The personalization and blurring of boundaries. And then people you casually use the words burnout or compassion fatigue, or what happens when somebody really is no longer present in an authentic way. That's compassion fatigue. Burnout is when, it's over. I mean, basically, you're just going through the motions, you're mailing it in, as they say. So these are factors that if you want to sort of cultivate psychological safety and engagement, you've got these things to kind of contend with. And it's important, as we mentioned earlier, to acknowledge this, that you know that this exists, that you know that you are there, that you are present in knowing that this person that you're working with, you know, it's okay. They don't always have to put that face that everything is fine. You know, you're not going to be disappointed in them. And how you handle that in a way that sort of is healthy and lets being seen and heard here in this context of pain and suffering, of discomfort, of exhaustion. So the questions then, you know, kind of boils down to, are we meeting our supervisees' expectations? Are we keeping our supervisees interested, motivated, and professionally fulfilled? Are we recognizing and acknowledging the emotional demands and the stress-inducing aspects of the work? Are we engaging supervisees in safe explorations of their own reactions to stress? Are we facilitating the resilience of our supervisees and what they need to counter compassion fatigue and burnout? And so, so if you want to do a self-check, you know, print this, put it on your screen, and answer that question. Answer these questions, because these are sort of the foundations of engagement and psychological safety. So resilience is important. I'm not going to go into why. You all know why. It helps a person really be able to engage, and in a way that keeps them from sort of getting sucked in. You know, so, you know, how you can be authentically engaged and at the same time safe, feel safe, is an important part of how you create this culture of engagement and psychological safety. So again, a nice list of things around supervisors and what you're encouraged to do. But the focus, sort of the thing I want to tease out of this, is being aware of distress, being aware and staying, you know, not denying, because a lot of, you know, there's a lot of denial going on. And blaming when somebody's in distress and their behavior, like in the example of Kevin, there's something going on and he's sort of like, you don't want to get into it because it's difficult and because it requires you perhaps that you are going to expose yourself. So being keenly aware that the jobs you're asking people to do put them in this position of vulnerability. And feeling psychologically safe is knowing that my supervisor it knows that and is willing to talk to me about it. And I feel safe enough to talk about it. And I feel safe enough to disclose. But if we're going to do that, then we have to acknowledge, we have to be prepared to acknowledge and support people's feelings, to elicit what the person thinks is best, because what have we learned over the years is that you are the master of your own healing. So it's not to tell somebody how they should heal, but it's rather to elicit from them what they think is the best way for them to heal. To encourage supervisees to identify strengths, needs, and resources. Of course, somebody mentioned offering connections to external resources that might be helpful. To not give directions or unsolicited advice, but to hear and to see, to get it, to pay attention enough to get where the person is. And of course, never assume that you know what's best. That's a way of making a person feel safe and feel able to share their vulnerabilities. And of course, these are also opportunities for you to share your lived experience. Not for you to have an audience for that, but that's always in the service of the person, that you're sharing something as a way of connecting. So you can ask things, and this is a nice list for you to kind of come back to because very often people say, well, I don't know what to say. So these are the kinds of things. I'm not going to read through this, but you can look at them, as a way of kind of letting a person know that you hear them, that you see them, and that you're interested in, that you're curious, without delving too far, without blaming, and with a recognition that what they're going through is legitimate, and you want to be there in a way to kind of support and guide. So the timing is good. I'm not going to ask you this. Am I going too fast? Because I know I am. But if you have any questions as I'm going through this, there is time for you to interrupt me. I know I can go. But so do you have any questions so far? Or comments or ideas? This is an opportunity for you to be seen and heard. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
See? No, I'm just kidding. We do two things, and as I'm processing this, it's helping a lot. So like when we start our staff meetings, we always we have a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being great, 1 being not so great. We go around and we ask our team, how do we feel today? So that we kind of know where each other stands for today, and if somebody's struggling with something or whatnot. And we don't get into the specifics of what that is. But then we also end our meetings with, we do what's called just a roundabout, and we'll go to the person to our left or to the person to our right. And we'll tell that person what we're thankful for with them, some positive aspects about what we enjoy working with them, just to lift them up, and then that person tells the next person, and go around to encourage each other for the day. But we don't get into specifics of, what somebody's going through, but we started out by saying hey, we care, it's good for us to know where you're at today. But we also want to encourage you at the end of this meeting as well. And
Right.
Hopefully they're not at that, if they're having a bad day, hopefully the meeting has uplifted them.
Well, sometimes when you're having a bad day and it's very bad, you feel very invisible, right? You feel that everybody else isn't, you're alone. It's a feeling of isolation. And I love what this exercise is, because it's validating a person. You turn into the person next to you, you tell them what you like about working with them. And if that isn't, oh yeah, I'm having a lousy day, but somebody sees me, somebody hears me, somebody cares about me, somebody thinks that I'm a good person. That could go a long way in terms of giving somebody that little bit of lift that could then maybe help them to feel safe. And be able then to maybe get the help they need, or get the ear they need in that moment. So thank you. That's a great exercise. Everybody should write this down.
Something just you triggered something for me, Gwen, which is I think developing a skill for people. But if you've done a culture change and had to let a lot of people go, you get better and better at this. And it is that, and I'll tell you, my first thought when you said it was, boy, I better not sit next to somebody I don't like. And then this triggered for me, which is that nobody's 100% bad.
Right.
And even when you're firing somebody, there are things about them that are positive. And what's nice about what you do is for each person to dig and at least try to find something positive about somebody, and maybe then they'll believe it too. And I had a thought process while you were speaking that made me chuckle. It's very nice.
Yeah. And sort of, we're going to get to some other things, but this is a very nice activity to engage staff with. So expanding resilience is very important. Again, you'll have these slides, so you'll be able to kind of spend some time with them. So operationalizing psychological safety. And this is kind of like, okay, so yeah, we talked a lot about the personal things that we might do. This particular, this idea of having everybody in a room of a team, it's a sort of team building here, of the safety that people feel, even to be able to, hold up a number, and admit that, that takes a lot, because it speaks to, admitting something about yourself. You've got to feel somewhat safe in being able to do that. So you create safety, first of all, in a sort of the kind of the structure that you create in your supervision. So supervisory meetings takes place in a space that is private and ensures confidentiality. The space is comfortable, free of distractions. Scheduling is consistent. Having to cancel or having to make a session shorter because you've got this call you've got to make. No, this has to be kind of something that is really very special and kept very, very kind of protected. That mutual expectations are clear and predictable, that there is a chance, and this is in the reset discussion that we had about, starting from the beginning, what do you expect from me? What do I expect from you? How am I falling short? And so on. And the limits of confidentiality, where, everything we talk about can't be confidential, because there are some things that I would have to report. And, like if you're going to kill somebody, or if you're going to set fire to the main office, like I can't, that's where confidentiality ends. And the format, the kind of the rhythm of the supervision, this is the formal supervision, is arrived at collaboratively. Because it's often we take for granted that, asking somebody when they walk in, so what do you want to talk about today? That might not be what works for somebody. Maybe what they want to start, maybe they want to start somewhere else. And sort of like that supervision, it takes time to develop the environment for the supervision to be able to be meaningful, and that it works for both parties. So again, in the supervisory relationship, self-disclosure is welcome, content is unrestricted, the supervisor should be encouraged to lead. I'm going to kind of, again, not necessarily read through all of this, except a couple of them. It's very often, and somebody mentioned this, to stop and ask for feedback. Is this working for you? Because it may not be. And showing that respect, that you want to know. Again, I am going to be humble enough as a supervisor to be able to say, this may not be working for you. I may not be fulfilling what your expectations or what your needs are. And this is something that I always encourage clinicians to do, or, practitioners to do, case managers, counselors to do, is to ask the clients that they're working with, is this working for you? It's very important in this whole construct to be aware of the power differential, and that as a supervisor or as a practitioner, and try to, as much as possible, level that playing field, because that power differential can be very intimidated, and it can make somebody feel unsafe. So, to kind of like, yeah, acknowledge, yeah, I have this power, I can fire you. But it's very clear to both of us that that's not likely to happen unless, you're not going to get fired if you do your job. And it's to establish that level of trust. And it's not about that you're not allowed to make a mistake. You can make a mistake, but bring that to me. I don't want to find out about something. Let's be transparent with each other, right? So you see how all these things sort of fit together. But there's a way that has to be articulated and established for the supervision to be sort of be meaningful and effective. So there is such a thing as a supervision contract, and you can go online and you can see models of this, where you actually do that in a contractual way. You don't need to ultimately sign the contract, but you could use it as a model to be able to establish the parameters of what your supervisory relationship is going to be about. And that makes a person feel safe, because the experience becomes predictable. I feel safe if I walk into an experience and I pretty much know what's going to happen, as opposed to if I walk into experience and it's a crapshoot. And every time I walk into that room, it's, and I've had a supervisor like that who was an extremely moody person. And every time I walked into the office, I didn't know what to expect. And it was a horrible experience. So, this kind of creates a structure of safety in that it gives me sort of this feeling of, hey, I know what to expect when I from this person, both in the supervisory session and outside of it, but it gives me a sense of safety. When my world is more predictable, I feel safe. We all know that. So let's try to make the supervisory relationship as predictable as possible. The other thing is conducting meetings. Meetings can be a very intimidating and triggering experience for people. And so this chart, this is something I also want to send to people, Edie. It's to distinguish in your own head what kind of meeting it is and what you expect out of it, and that you communicate that to people. I have been in meetings, I have to tell you, where my anxiety level shot through the roof because I didn't know what they wanted me to do there. I didn't know what my role was. I didn't know what the expectation was at the end of the meeting. I didn't know what it was that I had, like what kind of participation. And so it's important in your own head and to articulate it at the beginning of the meeting. This is a decision-making meeting. This is a discussion. This is an information sharing. And that we have goals, we have outcomes of each kind of meeting. And again, what are the characteristics? This is a very important part of psychological safety. It's that when people walk into a room with a bunch of other people, it's clear, it's predictable, because you've articulated it when you invited them to the meeting, that when this is not going to be an action meeting, I just want to hear what people think. Or this is not a feedback meeting. This is not a dialogue. This is just to share information, and to give people that sense of, okay, I can calm down. I know what I'm walking into. The other thing is spending some time with people around self-care and actually having elements of the organization, ways in which, I've had some organizations have health newsletters. There are lots of ways to do this. I had one organization, actually, recently I did a presentation, and what they did was, actually it was through NIAPRS, what the person did is they created this safe, I forget what they call it, a Zen room or a safe room, I forget. But where they actually had this place where people could go, it was a room, and it was lit a specific way, and there were places for people to sit down, and the idea was that if you need someplace to go to kind of decompress, this is where you can do that. And it was okay to access that at any time. And he was even of the mindset that if people needed to go take a little cat nap, that they could do that too, because that could be very healing if you're going through a lot of stress. So there's a wide variety of things that you could do around self-care, but more importantly than resources, it's to give people the message that self-care is important. And that is part of psychological safety, that you encourage them. And you could tell people things like, hey, maybe you really need to take a couple of days off to kind of, because you've been under a lot of stress, or this has been a very difficult. I mean, however you do it, but it's to acknowledge, again, in a different way, that the work is hard, and to give people tools to care for themselves, and to emphasize the importance of self-care. And you're a model for that too, in that you have to demonstrate that you're taking care of yourself, which I don't know a supervisor or anyone in a position of leadership that doesn't need a lot of self-care. It's a very important part of our nourishing ourselves and of our replenishing our energy, because we have to worry, and we do, about so many people. And that's one of the things that I always found sort of the most difficult thing about being in a leadership position is that there are so many people that are depending on us to give them a livelihood. And so we have to take care of ourselves to be able to do that, because that's a big load. That's a heavy, heavy burden.
And
So
by
you
the
could-
way, this is one of the most important things because people don't do as you say, they do as you do.
Right.
So they model what you do.
Yeah. I once did a consultation many, many years ago. It wasn't really within in my wheelhouse, but I'll tell you very quickly. It was for an advertising agency, and it was a very high level person in advertising agency, and you know, so I went to his office, and as I walked to his office, there were a bunch of cubicles. And it happened to have been lunchtime, but there were a lot of dog and cat beds in each of the cubicles. And I found that to be there were no dogs or cats, but the beds were there. And so I asked him, and he said, yeah, well, this is our creative group. And we feel that they are most at ease and most comfortable and most creative when they have their pets at work. So we allow them to bring their pets at work. So I said, so do you have a dog walking service? Who takes your dogs out? But anyway, I'm thinking that it's sort of funny, but it's not that funny because, you know, we certainly, I don't expect that you're going to be able to accommodate that, but we all keep soothing objects and photographs and things that are associated with warmth and comfort around us. So it can't be a live dog or cat, but it's still, we all strive to keep things around us that make us calm down. And so, it's important to consider, that people, I am very much an object person. I like to keep things. I'm a little bit of a hoarder. But one of the things that I had a supervisor come in once and says, what is this shit all over your desk? And it was so insulting to me because these things were important. They were a picture, they were a little object I picked up in this place and in that place, and a rock from the Grand Canyon. But I needed that because those things made me feel safe. They were tokens, right? Anyway, so we need to be respectful of that. Okay. So the other thing is the idea tank, and I think I forgot, Gwen, was it you who mentioned about making people feel that their ideas are important? So we did this at my last organization. We had something called the idea tank, where we encouraged employees to examine organizational processes and consider alternative, innovative, more efficient, simpler ways of doing things. And then they proposed it via submission template, what the idea was, what they wanted to do. And it was routed to departmental leads because something has to do with HR, some things had to do with finance, some things had to do with, regular service delivery. And then the ideas, we piloted a lot of those ideas for feasibility. But once we adopted an idea, we rolled it out. The employee suggesting it got a cash reward. And in our organization, it was $1,500. And they were acknowledged via agency newsletter, e-blast, annual meeting, and there was a ceremony. And you have no idea what energy this spurred. Of course, we got a lot of crazy ideas, but all in all, it continued when I left there, they still had it. And we had changed a few things as a result of employee input and employee. So this is, again, another way of making a person sort of feel seen and heard. So here is concrete, and you got a little bit of cash in the process. So to summarize in the next 3 minutes, this is about creating psychological safety, how you do that, being mindful of stressors, being mindful of how susceptible our staff is to compassion, fatigue, and burnout, to keep supervision strengths-based and person-centered. We know that, right? We know that all about that. That employees need to be seen and heard, and your role, be mindful of your role in promoting resilience and supporting staff wellness. Again, this is what you can do, and we've sort of gone through that pretty thoroughly, I think. And psychological safety serves to prevent compassion fatigue and burnout, and to deliver the best employee performance that results in the best outcomes for persons served. Because remember, an employee who feels psychologically safe can convey psychologically safety to their people they work with and to help them to heal. So this is a parallel process down the line. So we're in an era that demands a supervisory style that recognizes in response to high levels of stress, rounds and rewards physically and virtually to stay connected to and appreciate employees, engages in robust communication to make the workplace more predictable, creates a community of hope and health, and encourages and supports self-care. So the new workforce has shifted from job satisfaction to personal growth. What was once important as my paycheck, it's now my purpose. My satisfaction has become my development. My boss is now my coach. My annual review are my ongoing conversations. My weaknesses are my strengths, and my job is my life. And this comes from really many interviews with and much more so since COVID, of how people see work and what they want, what they expect from work. And it's no longer entirely the money that you get every 2 weeks. So again, I'm not going to read through this. You have the slides, and I suggest, as Edie has, for you to get a sense of it, to remember it, to go through, especially these slides that summarize. And then this is something you can cut out and keep near you in terms of what your workforce needs. They need to feel understood. They need to feel autonomous. They need to feel valued. They need to feel cared for, and they need to feel invested. And hopefully this is a good way to close. It's exactly 3 o'clock. Thank you for participating today. Thank you for being interested in this. And I wish you all the best going forward, and wonderful experiences in your roles as leaders and supervisors.
Thank you, Eve. As always, that was wonderful. Are there any final questions as we close out? Or Eve is always willing, if you think of something afterwards, to just shoot it to me and I will send it off to him and he'll answer any question you have.
Absolutely.
So is there any final words here as we close up shop?
Since it's our last one, I just want to say it's so nice to meet you guys, and I hope that we all stay connected. Thank you so much for this training. When I come to New York, I know exactly who I'm visiting. When I come to Colorado, hey, Krika!
Come on out.
Well, you're welcome anytime. I am going to at the send everyone your names, titles, and email addresses out to everybody. I'm going to do a little bit of work here at the end. And I encourage you to stay in contact with each other. You've been a great group, and it's been my pleasure to work with you this year. Make sure you finish up everything and send me those last 2 pieces. I'll get you out everything, and I'm not going anywhere. So if you need anything or want to chit chat at any time, you know how to reach me as well. And I'm more than willing to talk to anybody at any time. So again, thanks so much to Eve. What a wonderful presentation. And thank you to all of you for the honesty and hard work and thought that you've put into every one of our classes and all your coaching. Our coaches all love you, all. It's just a wonderful group. And thank you and best of luck. And to my 2 coachees, we still have some sessions, so we'll talk again. Thanks again, Eve.
Take care,
Bye,
everybody.
Thank you, Edie.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye-bye.